And if they want to go to LA, they can still go to LA between the games if they want. They've got enough money to pay for a jet to go and then come back on game days if they want the entertainment. Or they can drive to Vegas too if they really want. I'll hire the car for them.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast, brought to you by Fantrax and Basketball Monster. And today's Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast is brought to you by SeatGeek. Download the mobile app for the easiest way to buy tickets and use the promo code LOFANTASY to get yourself a $20 rebate on your first purchase. My name is Josh Lloyd and you can find me on Twitter and on Instagram at redrock_bball and on Facebook at facebook.com/redrockbasketball and of course over on basketballmonster.com, and check out our Twitter account over there, which is at baskmonster. The second round of the playoffs is well and truly begun, and it was not a good day if you enjoy close basketball. Two absolute smashings, one I guess predictable, the other wholly weirdly to see go down, and that was the Rockets and the Spurs. We're going to talk about all that. We're going to preview the two games we've got on Tuesday as well. So
let's get to it.
Let's get to it indeed, and we'll start getting to it by talking about the perfect DFS lineups. On FanDuel, Kyrie Irving had 42.4 and Kyle Lowry had 37.9, once again showing that paying up for point guards is a pretty decent strategy when looking at DFS lineups. At shooting guard, Jimmy Harden had 47.2 and Manu snuck in there with 11.7. Yes, it was a very low scoring night on FanDuel. Small forwards, PJ Tucker 28.7 and Trevor Ariza 32.8. At the power forwards, the two white three-point shooting big men, Kevin Love at 35.3 and Ryan Anderson at 31.3, and Clint Capella rounded it out at center with 40.1 for a total of 307.8, and that cost $59,800. On DraftKings, Lowry at 42, Harden at 51.75, Trevor Ariza at 36.5, Ryan Anderson 34, Tristan Thompson 37, Kyrie 47, Tucker 31.75, and Clint Capella 42.75, and that was a total of 322.75 points, and that cost an astonishingly low $47,900, so leaving $2,100 on the table. The leftover excess budget is more common in the playoffs, so if you create a lineup that you like and there's $900 left, if there's $1,100 left, I wouldn't be rushing to go and change it, because we've seen multiple times throughout these last couple of weeks that lineups that have left over $1,000 on the table have been the perfect lineups. It's not always ideal, but it's not something that in the regular season, if you're leaving $1,000 on the table, that's probably not the best way to do it. But in the playoffs, it does become a little bit more palatable to leave that little bit of extra cash out there on the table when constructing your DFS lineups. All right, so it's time for a word from one of our sponsors, a long-time sponsor of the show, and that is, of course, SeatGeek. Buying tickets online for sports and concerts, it's always been a confusing process, and it's always been hard to find the best deal for that game or show that you want to go to. And none of the older ticket sites, they didn't want to change that, but SeatGeek came along. They created an amazing app and website that makes it easier than ever for fans to buy and sell tickets. It's the first place that I go. It's the first place that you should go when you're looking to buy tickets, and that is the SeatGeek app or SeatGeek.com. SeatGeek does all the price comparison for you by searching multiple ticket sites, ensuring you get the best possible deal. SeatGeek does all that work for you, saving you time and money, and they want to help you get the best bang for your buck. So what SeatGeek does is it grades all the tickets on a color scale. Green is good, red is bad, and it tells you, hey, are you getting the most bang for your buck from these tickets? If so, yes, and then you can save yourself money, time, and get great value in the process. Best of all listeners to this podcast get a $20 rebate off their first SeatGeek purchase. To get your $20 rebate on tickets, download the SeatGeek app. That's free. Go to the settings tab and click add a promo code. Also free. Enter the promo code. Shockingly enough, that's free to do as well, and that's LOFANTASY. And then when you're ready to buy your tickets, SeatGeek will send you $20 after you've made your first ticket purchase. So download the SeatGeek app and enter the promo code LOFANTASY today. All right, we'll talk about what went down on Monday, it was yuck. Toronto and Cleveland, the Cavs go up 1-0 on a 116-105 victory. It wasn't that close. It was a spanking of epic proportions. And yeah, who knows where Toronto goes from here. I think they'll sneak a game 3 or 4, but the Cavs put the foot down in this one and it was over pretty quickly. Now, Kyle Lowry looked good, and that's a huge positive for the Raptors. He had 20 points with 11 assists on 54% shooting, while DeMar DeRozan 19, 7 and 2. DeMar DeRozan wasn't good. He didn't get to the line hardly at all, only 5 times, which is low for DeRozan, and he was really poor in his plus minus also. The Raptors did make that change to their starting lineup. Now, with these 2 games, I said there's 2 changes that I think are going to happen potentially in these lineups. I think that Casey will go away from Powell, which I think is the wrong decision. And I also thought that Popovich would go back and start Dedmon, which I thought was the right decision. Turns out the coaches did the opposite of those things that I thought was right and wrong. They did go away from Powell, which I thought was wrong, and they didn't go to Dedmon, which, again, I thought was the wrong move from Greg Popovich. But as we have seen time and time and time and even time again, non-Powell's good, and he shouldn't be shunted so that other players like Damari Carroll can come in and honestly just pull their pants down and shit at the center of the court, because that's basically what Carroll's done for 2 seasons in Toronto. We had Jonas Valanciunas back in the starting lineup. He struggled. This was never going to be a good matchup for him, so I'm not really understanding the not the point of it, because he's in there to battle Tristan Thompson, but he still only played the 21 minutes. 6 and 6 for Valanciunas. Don't expect more minutes than that moving forward. PJ Tucker had a double-double, 13 and 11 with a block, but he still only saw 26 minutes because Carroll sucked up 15 minutes and had 3 points in that playing time. Serge Ibaka was horrendous to start the game, horrible, and then got hot in the middle and ended with 15, 6 and 3 on 43% shooting. He looked disgusting to start off, but then as soon as I tweeted that he looked terrible, he hit about 5 shots in a row, making me look stupid, but in the end, it was an okay night from Serge. Now, as for Powell, he had 12 and 2 with 2 triples and 2 steals in 21 minutes. And I think we're going to see more minutes from Powell moving forward. He did bring the Raptors back a little bit towards the end, and he does need to play more than this. Patrick Patterson was awful, 5 points in his 22 minutes, but he will still continue to get that playing time, while Corey Joseph saw 10 minutes, and those minutes that Joseph didn't see are the ones that went to Powell, and that's exactly how it should be. Onto the Cavs, LeBron played 41. He had 35, 10 and 4. He hit 2 triples. He had a steal. He had a block. He had enough time to pick up a beer off a service tray and pretend to have a drink out of it. That's how easily he was taking it. And then he doubles down on that in the press conference after the game, saying he doesn't really drink beer, but if that had been a red wine, he probably would have had a sip. Now, can you imagine if LeBron James had picked up a glass of wine or even the beer and drunk it during the game? Imagine the hot takery that would have flowed from everybody. I wanted him to take that drink. It would have been absolutely hilarious. Who was it? Was it JaVale McGee that landed in the stands and sat next to someone and ate their popcorn? Sure, it sounds like something JaVale would do. I'm sure it was him. Let me know if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure JaVale did that, but taking a beer off a tray and having a drink would have been next level hilarious. Now, Kyrie was great. He had 24 with 10 assists and 2 steals, and Kevin Love had 18 and 9 with 2 steals and a block. And J.R. Smith had to have some x-rays on his previously fractured thumb. He reckons he's fine. And then the report came out saying he didn't have x-rays. So we're not really sure which one of those is 100% true at this point. He wasn't great again. I might as well just not say that and just highlight the times where he actually plays well, which is maybe once, twice this year. He had 6 points in his 22 minutes, while Iman Shumpert stepped up and played pretty well, 5, 4, and 3 in his 18 minutes. But he's never going to get a large enough role to be an impact guy for DFS purposes anyway. The second game was even more shocking and even more egregious of a blowout, and that was the Rockets and the Spurs. The Rockets had this one done from the word go from the second quarter. They were up 30 at halftime. They ended up winning by 25 or 27 points, 126 to 99. James Harden had 20, 14 with 4 steals and 3 triples. Clint Capella, only the 25 minutes. I'll continue to say this. Capella is good. He is really, really, really good. 20 and 13 for Capella with 2 blocks. He is going to continue to torch whatever bullshit lineup this is that Greg Popovich is running out there if he continues to do that. And Trevor Ariza got hot as well, 23 and 4 with 5 triples. Even Ryan Anderson got in on the act, and he's been useless throughout the playoffs. 14 points with 6 boards and 4 triples, and Lou Williams had 13 and Eric Gordon had 11. It was a contribution right across the board from the Rockets. Nene got ejected for they ejected him for putting his hands on Dwayne Dedman's throat. It looked like he was grabbing him by the shoulders. But if the NBA's got a real fascination with people grabbing throats, I understand why he was ejected. It didn't look like a throat grab to me. It looked like he was trying to put the pressure point squeeze on his trapezium. But that was Nene done at the end of the third quarter. And I did tweet this out today, but shout out to the way that the Rockets have handled Nene this season. They have managed him through the season, limiting his minutes, sitting him out when necessary, and he has been a real force throughout these playoffs. This game was that much of a blowout that we had 5 minutes of Bobby Brown, Kyle Wiltshire, and Troy Williams. 7 minutes of Sammy Decker and of the table Montrezl Harrell. So even though Decker is back, he's not going to be cracking that 8-man rotation. Now, onto the Spurs. Now, I'm fairly critical of coaches. I don't know if you've heard me say that before, but I'm pretty critical of coaches. Especially, I'm not critical of play calling all that much. I'm not critical of things they do in practice or motivation. I'm critical of nonsense rotations and nonsense lineups. And Greg Popovich gets a pass. Until today, because this was dreadful. I've been saying this for weeks. In that first round playoff series, there is no way that you can go into this series with David Lee starting, because James Harden is going to eat you alive. You need Dwayne Dedman in there. You cannot start David Lee. You cannot start Pau Gasol, because it's going to end up like Enes Kanter. And it ended up like Enes Kanter. Harden and Capella destroyed David Lee, they destroyed LaMarcus Aldridge, they destroyed Pau Gasol, and we saw Dwayne Dedman, the Undertaker, who also got ejected for 2 techs. We saw Dedman come in for the first time with 2 minutes left in the third quarter. Dedman should have been starting. Dedman can guard a pick and roll. Dedman can switch onto James Harden and not get embarrassed like David Lee. Or like Pau Gasol, or like LaMarcus Aldridge, who looked like an absolute horror show out there. This was bad coaching. This was coaching that stood out like dog's balls from miles away. And I said it, I don't even know how many times I said it, that he needs to start Dedman. Now, I'm not saying that I'm a smarter person than Popovich. I am not. I am not a better basketball coach than Popovich. I am not a better basketball mind than him in any stretch. But this was as no-brainer-ish as no-brainer, and it blew up. And it bit him on the ass to the tune of a 27-point Game 1 loss. Now, whether Pop corrects that or not, I don't know. But Dedman came in. He was fine. He was aggressive. He defended well before he got ejected after playing just 7 minutes. But he came in his 7 minutes, had 6 points, 2 rebounds, 1 steal, 1 block, hit all 3 of his shots. He has to play more. Has to. And I think that change is coming. The other change they could do, because they did bust out Kawhi Leonard at the 4 in this game very early. So maybe they start John Simmons and push Kawhi to the 4 and have Parker, Simmons, Green, Kawhi, and then Aldridge at the 5, who, again, was absolutely dreadful. Aldridge had 4 and 6 in 25 minutes. 4 and 6. And he was about a minus 75 as well. Dave Lee had 4 and 7 and still got 29 minutes, even though, and this is again a massive criticism of Popovich, even though he was continually getting roasted in this game, Popovich did just refuse to change things up until the end of the third quarter, which in my mind was really, really bad coaching. Tone Parker had 11 and 4 in his 23 minutes, but otherwise it was just minutes spread out all over the place. Expect more Dedman. I'd expect even more John Simmons, who had 11 points in 21 minutes, but he has his own deficiencies. Not a good situation. And if this David Lee thing continues, the Spurs are getting swept. I'm sorry they are, but that you cannot get past the shitness that David Lee brings. You can't do it. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly how Popovich runs that moving forward, but it definitely wasn't great in this one, and it was something that, again, stood out really clearly to me as it was going to be the problem. D'Antoni and Harden attacked it, and it went exactly to script, and you can't ask for more than that if you're a player or a Rocket supporter. Let's switch on now to talk about the games that we've got coming up on Tuesday. The first one of those, the Washington Wizards and the Boston Celtics. The Celtics got the first game. They're favored by 5.5 here in this one. The total is 218.5. Isaiah Thomas lost a tooth in game 1. He says he is going to play, so he's ready to go. Jan Mahinmi is out. And then there's the curious case of Markieff Morris. Scott Brooks says he's doubtful. We're doubtful. We're preparing that he's not playing. Ask Markieff Morris. I'm playing. It's Markieff Morris. I looked at the x-rays. I know that it's not broken, so the doctors can't tell me anything about not playing. I'm playing. So, what is it? Is he out? Is he in? I don't know at this point. I would lean towards playing. He is adamant that he is playing, and he has said it multiple times that he is playing, and then the coaching staff says the opposite. It does make a difference if Markeith does or doesn't play. If he is out, Machin Gortat plays a ton more minutes. He probably plays 40 minutes, and we get a lot more Jason Smith and a lot more Kelly Oubre. And that might be an impact thing, and you can use Smith and Oubre in GPPs then. And Gortat becomes a real solid cash centre. If Markeith plays, it does take a bit of Gortat's security away, and it takes away the upside of Smith and Oubre and even Bogdanovic to a degree as well. Let's talk point guards. Isaiah, 9,300. As I said last time, he weirdly does really well against the Wizards and John Wall, and it happened again. He had 47 points in Game 1. 48 points actually in Game 1 at 9,300. I've got no problem with using Isaiah Thomas again at 9,300. You get the feeling that the family concerns with his sister is slightly been lifted from him, and he's not playing under as much of a cloud as he was, and it is resulting in better play. He's at 8-9 on DraftKings. I really do like Isaiah. As for Johnny Wall, he has struggled against Boston. We saw it in the regular season. Now, he didn't struggle per se in Game 1, but he also didn't live up to a 10,000 plus salary, putting up 47 points. So if they're both giving you 47 and you save $1,000 by taking Isaiah Thomas, I'll happily take Isaiah Thomas in that situation, because remember, Isaiah Thomas is not guarding John Wall. So we've got Marcus Smart, we've got Avery Bradley, who's taking that responsibility most of the time. So Wall is okay, but Isaiah is the guy that I would look for. Terry Rozier comes in at 2,300. He had another strong game, 17 points in Game 1, and he's actually averaging 16.5 over the previous 3 games. 2 games against Chicago, 1 game against Washington in only 19 minutes. At 2,300, if he gives you 17 points in 15 minutes, that's a pretty big win, and that's a decent way to enable you to afford some big-name guys, Durant, Curry, Draymond, Thomas, Wall, those other sort of players. So don't completely discount Rozier. He does have some of that weird upside. Brandon Jennings has been atrocious, average of 7 points across his last 5 games, and at 2,600, I'd rather go down to 23 and take Terry Rozier. At shooting guard, Avery Bradley, 6,400, 2 strong games in a row from Braddles. At 6,400, I feel alright about using him. I don't know if there's massive upside, but in cash, I feel okay with him, while Marcus Smart, similar. I don't love him for tournaments, but for cash, I think he is decent. He's just going to give you, and we saw how low the FanDuel perfect lineup was today. You're not looking at 5x, as I say all the time. You're looking at 4.5, 4.7. And Smart, who just gives you 26, 25 a night at 6,000, it's not far away from that sort of level. So I think his minutes will be fine, and I think his production will be pretty decent, pretty solid. 79 from Braddles Beal. I'd rather take Avery Bradley and save $1,500, but if I've got the $1,500 left to play up to, then Beal is fine. He's going to be consistent. He's going to put up numbers. He's going to play big minutes. But the question is, does he get 40 to 45 or 30 to 35? And I think 30 to 35 is probably the more realistic expectation for Beal, which means at that price, there are probably going to be better ways to spend that. Gerald Green started the last game. He had -1 points in 7 minutes. I wouldn't be stunned if we saw limited production from Green the rest of this series. He's at 2,100, and to me, that is just a tournament flyer type of a situation. I think his little run as being the playoff savior is done. At small forward, Otto Porter, 4,900. Love that. Looked great the last few. He had 35 in Game 1. There is always the risk of reduced usage, meaning very few points. But at 4,900, how hard is it to go past that? It's pretty tough. He's at 58 on DraftKings, so you can take or leave that. But 49 on FanDuel, it is really tough to go past that. Love what Jay Crowder did in the last game. He had 35 points. At 6,200, though, I would much rather go 1,300 less and take Otto Porter for what I assume is going to be relatively similar production between these two guys most of the time. Now, Crowder is at 6,000 over on DraftKings, so him and Porter become a little bit closer. They become more of a toss of the coin over there on that site. Bogdanovic is always just a tournament guy, but even at $4,000 where he currently sits, the upside there is quite limited. If he was a guy like a Gerald Green or a Rozier who came in at 2,300, I'd love that for tournaments, but I don't really see much upside in the current salary he's at 4,000. For the power forwards, Markeef's at 59. Again, the ankle bothered him in the last game. He played 11 minutes and scored 11 points. At 5,900, I think he's a GPP option because I do think that he'll be limited with the ankle. But that might mean that pushes his ownership down. And if he has a big one, which is definitely a possibility, then he becomes a low-owned guy that you can profit off. Kelly Olynyk is at $5,000. His numbers have been solid, but not for 5,000. 18 points in game 1, 18-point average over the last 3. At $5,000, he just doesn't get enough minutes, which pisses me off, as you're well aware, to be an impactful guy. Urepko, Amir, Jason Smith, all those guys would be tournament punt players. Urepko is by far the cheapest, but I don't see really any point in getting too interested in them. Marcin Gortat at 6,000, as I touched on, he had 42 in game 1. No Morris, you smash Gortat and he becomes a core player. Without Morris, he's still pretty strong, but he's not at the same level, and he's at 59 on DraftKings as well. Whereas Al Horford has been absolutely crushing it over the last 5 games or so, where he's averaging 41 points. 8,300. Gortat's not stopping him. 40 looks to be the norm here for Al, and I'm there for it. If you've got money to spend up for at center, then Horford is a pretty solid way to go. Although there is a bloke in Utah who might have something to say with that. But on FanDuel, given the price discrepancy between the two, I reckon Horford might be a bit of a better option than Big Bad Rudy. Let's move on to the next game now, and that is the Utah Jazz and the Golden State Warriors. The Warriors are favored by 13.5. It's big. The total is 207. Now, at the moment, we know that Alec Burks is out. We know that Kevon Looney is out. And then there are a couple of questionable players. Sean Livingston is questionable. If he is out, it gives more minutes to Pat McCaw and Ian Clark. But the big one for Utah is Derek Favors is questionable. Now, Favors is only, at this point, looks like he's only going to play backup center minutes. But if something happens to go bare, which has happened in 3 of the 7 games in round 1, then Favors steps up and provides good value. But he is questionable, so if he misses, you're going to get maybe 10 minutes of Jeff Withey, some more Joe Johnson, some more Joe Ingles, some more Boris Diaw as well. So that is something to watch. You'd be using Favors in a tournament situation going, because if Gobert goes down or he gets into foul trouble, then Favors is going to step up, which again, we saw in 3 games out of the 7 in round 1. But it's not a lock situation by any stretch of the imagination. Let's start with point guards. This is a game. Now, the Warriors play up in pace. The Jazz play down. So we've got a mid-paced game at 207. The first game is much higher at 218.5. Curry, 9,900 for Steph, did not do well against the Jazz in the regular season with an average of under 39 points. Now, came off a blistering first-round series against the Blazers. 9,900 is fine. Honestly, I think I would rather take Isaiah Thomas in an up-paced game than the 10,000 on Curry, but Curry is always going to have some value. But if Kevin Durant's fully fit and firing, that does take a little bit away from Curry. George Hill continues to be that mid-priced guy at $6,000. If that's the direction you're going, he is fine, but I would rather be spending up and taking Curry, Thomas, Wall, any of those guys, and spending up at point guard as often is the better way to go about it. At shooting guard, Klay Thompson at 7,300. No interest in Klay outside of tournaments. We've seen that with Durant in, he is as streaky as they come. With Durant out, he is much more reliable. On DraftKings, though, at 6,200 for Klay, I get a little bit more interested, but still, I would lean towards him as a tournament guy, but heavily more as a tournament guy on DraftKings. There's a lot of value there at 6,200. I would still use him on FanDuel at 7,300, though. Rocket Rodney Hood at $4,000. Tournament, maybe a blow-up guy, but honestly, it's going to be Ingles that plays the majority of those minutes at shooting guard, it appears. Gordo Hayward, 8,500. Has not done well against the Warriors. Only a 22-point average the last 3 times is not great, but he's coming off a really strong end to that series against the Clippers. 8,500 for Hayward is all right, but I don't think it's the greatest spend of $8,000. Jinglin Joe's at 49, a strong end to the series in Game 7 with a 28-pointer, and has done really well against the Warriors in the past. I don't know if I'd look at him as a cash guy, but at under 5,000, if you've spent up on your point guards, it might be the way you have to go. As for Kevin Durant, 9,900, well, we don't really know what to expect from Durant. He came back from the knee issue. He had the calf problem. We didn't see him go flat out against the Blazers. He didn't put up big numbers against the Jazz in the regular season. I'd be looking at Durant more as a tournament sort of player. Iguodala's at 5,200, and that just feels a little bit too high. At power forward, there's nothing to love here really. Dave West, no. Draymond is the other one you look at, but he is at 8,800, and that's obviously expensive. He's at 79 on DraftKings, which I do favour, and I do think that that's a decent play to have a look at on DraftKings, but at 88 on FanDuel, I'm definitely not totally in on that with Draymond. Joey Johnson's at 57. I don't think he's going to have quite the same leeway he had against the Clippers, and even that sort of tightened up at the end of that series, so 5,700 for Joe Johnson. It just feels too high, and he's at 51 on DraftKings, which I can lean a little bit more towards, but it's still not working to me as a great play. I would look at Johnson more if Favors happens to be out, while Boris Diaw at 3,000, 19 points in Game 7. If Favors is out, I don't dislike using Diaw to load up on some other guys. If he gets you 16, 17 points at 3,000, you have to class that as a win. At center, we're talking Gobert, and that's really it. 9,600 is too high. The Warriors have been an elephant graveyard for centers, apart from Gobert, who's done well, but he's still not giving you $9,600 worth. Switch to DraftKings. He's at 7,300. Love that. That is a play that I would consider starting a lineup with. Yes, it is the Warriors, but he averaged 42 points against the Warriors during the regular season. Better than Hayward, better than Hill, and he dispelled some of that center narrative of playing against the Warriors through those last couple of games. And at 7,300, it's a very, very sexy price, and I do think that you need to look at that pretty steadily. JaVale McGee, Zaza Pachulia, I don't think any of those guys are really worth looking at all that much. All right, and here we go. Stephen Smith says, when making a lineup in a GPP, would it be better to make a lineup with more Wizards and Celtics players than Warriors and Jazz? I'm thinking it could be a blowout. Thanks. Okay. Yes. Couple of reasons why. And you knocked on one of them on the head. The blowout factor is real. So, guys like Curry and Durant might play 30 minutes. Hayward might play 30. Gobert might play 29. It might be a blowout. And you've got a higher total in Boston and Washington. Now, it doesn't mean that you put 8 blokes in a lineup from Boston, Washington, and one or none Golden State guys. But if the guys have a similar value, you lean towards the Boston and Washington one, just because it feels like it's going to be closer. It feels like it's going to be a faster pace as well. So yes, I think that's a way to go. And he also says it's crazy that Horford costs more than Gobert on DraftKings. Absolutely. So yeah, Gobert on DraftKings is stupidly low, and I think you absolutely have to look at him in pretty much every sort of lineup that you can set up. We're done. Short, sharp podcast today. Not much to talk about from the crap that was served up on Monday. Unless you're a Rockets fan or a Cavs fan, you'd be pretty happy with the games that you saw there. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and TuneIn. And follow me on Twitter at redrock_bball. We are done here, guys. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Joe Ingles.